Hey guys, this is Kritika. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to my channel because I make travel and lifestyle videos every week. If you've been following me for a while, you probably know that I just got back from Vietnam and I posted my Vietnam vlogs of all the places that I visited while I was there. And in the comments, a lot of people asked me how to plan a trip to Vietnam and what the budget for my trip was. So I thought I'll make a video about how to plan a trip to Vietnam. So this video I think will be useful to you if you're planning a trip to any place, but a lot of tips are also very specific to Vietnam. So I'm dividing this video into 4 parts. The first part is planning before the trip. The second part is budget. The third part is food. And the fourth part is general tips for when you're in Vietnam. Before I begin, I just want to say that I didn't do any planning for this trip at all. The little planning that we did was done by my brother. So the only things that we booked before going were flights and hotels and a couple of tours. But having been there, I feel like I do have a lot of tips to share. So without wasting too much time, let's just get started. Let's start with planning before the trip. So first things first, you're going to have to apply for a visa. Visa is actually available on arrival, but you still have to apply for it beforehand and get an acceptance letter. So if you do a simple Google search, you'll find a lot of websites where you can apply for the visa online. I'll leave the link to the website we used in the description below. We had to pay about $15 while applying for the visa acceptance letter, and the process was really simple. You have to fill out a form. You need to know the dates when you're going, so be sure you have that planned out in advance. The actual visa is given to you at the airport when you reach Vietnam. That whole process took about 1 hour and you have to pay a small fee there as well. I think it was $25. Next, you need to do some research and figure out which places you want to see in Vietnam. So we did our research and shortlisted a few places we wanted to go to. So we started from Ho Chi Minh City and then went to Hoi An, Da Nang, Phong Nha Ke Bang, Hanoi and Ha Long Bay. But there are a lot of other places. Vietnam is a beautiful country. If you like beaches, there are a ton of options. We didn't really go to those places because we didn't really want to go to beaches in January. But it comes down to your personal preference. So take some time, do some research and figure out which places you want to go to. And also figure out how many days you want to spend there. So we decided to spend about 4 to 5 days in each place because we wanted to see it properly. So most people who go to Vietnam either start their trip at Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. Hanoi is in north of Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh City is in the south. So you either start at Hanoi and then travel southwards and go to Ho Chi Minh City, or start at Ho Chi Minh City and then travel northwards and then end at Hanoi. We also booked our hotels before going, although you don't really have to do that. For the visa, you don't really need to show any bookings, so you can also go there and find hotels or hostels, but we didn't really want to do that, so we booked in advance. So we basically googled the best neighborhoods to stay at in each city. So in Ho Chi Minh City, we stayed in District 1. In Hoi An, we stayed in the ancient town. In Da Nang, we stayed by the beach, and in Hanoi, we stayed in the old quarter. We found and booked the hotels online, and we basically compared the prices on different sites like booking.com and Make My Trip, and then booked where we got the best price. We completely went by the ratings online. I'll leave the link to the hotels where we stayed in the description box below in case you want to check it out. Before going, you also want to figure out how much money you want to carry. So we actually got our rupees converted to dollars and then got them converted to Vietnamese dong over there. But ATM cards also work in Vietnam, so you could do that as well. Next, let's talk about the budget for the trip. Since I posted my vlogs, so many people have been messaging and asking me how much money they need to visit Vietnam and what the budget of my trip was, and I usually refrain from talking about that because it makes me kind of uncomfortable. And honestly, I feel like the budget actually depends on you, so depending on how much your budget is, you figure out what kind of trip you want to do. But nonetheless, I'm going to tell you what the budget for my trip was. So I've divided the budget into different major expense categories. So let's start with the flights. So my round trip from Chennai to Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi to Chennai was about 26,000 rupees. We booked our tickets pretty last minute. We booked it like 3-4 weeks before going, I think. So it probably was a little more expensive because of that. I'm not sure how much it is if you book it way in advance, but it's probably around a similar range. So that's how much you will have to spend for the flights. Within Vietnam, we took a flight from Ho Chi Minh City to Da Nang and then Dong Hoi to Hanoi. And we also took a train from Da Nang to Dong Hoi. So all of that combined was about 7,000 to 8,000 rupees per person. So basically all our flights and trains included was about 34,000 rupees per person. The next expense bracket is hotels. So our budget for hotels was about 1,500 to 2,000 rupees per night, and we found pretty decent hotels in that price range. Of course, if your budget is a lot lower, you can easily find a good hostel for like 300 rupees, and if you have a higher budget, you can easily find much better hotels for a lot more money as well. Also, while booking hotels, make sure your breakfast is included because that just makes life easier. Our next big expense was the tours that we booked. So most of our tours were pretty cheap except for Phong Nha Ke Bang and Ha Long Bay. So the trek we did in Phong Nha Ke Bang was about 21,000 rupees per person, and I know that's really expensive, but that's the only company that does treks over there and we really wanted to do it, so we spent that money. The Ha Long Bay cruise was about 15,000 rupees per person, and I know that's also a little expensive, but it was totally worth it. With Ha Long Bay, we were told you really get what you pay for, and I think that's totally true. The cheaper cruises actually take you to the more touristy parts of Halong Bay, so it's not really the same experience. But of course, if you're on a lower budget, you can do the cheaper tour, and I'm sure that's a great experience as well. We also booked a few other tours, but those weren't very expensive. They were about 2,000 to 3,000 rupees on average. I'll leave all the links in the description in case you want to check them out. The next expense bracket is food. The food in Vietnam is not only incredible but also super inexpensive. So you can get a really good meal for less than 100 rupees if you're eating Vietnamese street food, but not all our meals were street food. But most of our meals were really cheap. So we didn't really have a budget for the food, but you can easily budget like 500 rupees per day and get really good food for that much. So these were our major expenses, but we also ended up spending money on other things like local commute. We actually tried to walk wherever we could, so we didn't really spend much on local commute. We also did a bit of shopping, so we spent money there as well. And some of the places that we visited had an entry ticket, so you end up having to spend there as well. But those were all really insignificant amounts. So this was the budget for our trip, but that does not mean that's how much money you need to go to Vietnam. Your budget could easily be a lot higher or lower depending on what you want to do, so it really comes down to your personal preference. When it comes to traveling, I feel the best way to go about it is figure out how much money you have and figure out how to see that place in that much money. So if your budget is lower than what we spent, you could easily bring down your budget by eating cheaper food and staying in hostels. Also, if your budget is a lot lower, you don't really need to do the fanciest cruise in Halong Bay. I'm sure you'll have a great time doing a cheaper cruise as well. So there are a lot of ways in which you can save money and travel on a lower budget. And Vietnam is actually a really inexpensive country, so you can really easily travel on a low budget there. Now let's talk about food. The food in Vietnam is amazing. It's mind-blowing. And before going, I thought I'm going to have a problem because Vietnam is predominantly a non-vegetarian country and I'm vegetarian. But I'm pleased to tell you that I managed just fine and ate some amazing food there. So you don't really find vegetarian food, but you can talk to people and tell them to make vegetarian versions of non-vegetarian meals for you, and they do that. So what I did was I had this sheet of paper where one of my tour guides had written on it in Vietnamese that I'm vegetarian and I don't eat meat, but eggs are okay. So I just show that everywhere I went, but you can just use Google Translate and show that to people as well. And basically, if you tell them you want the chai version of the meal, they will understand. That means the vegetarian version of the meal. Also, the bigger cities there have other options for food as well. So we actually found Indian restaurants everywhere we went, and you get pizzas, pasta and other kinds of food. So food is not really a problem, but I really think you should try Vietnamese food because it's really nice. Some of the foods I think you should try are pho, banh cha, banh mi, Vietnamese spring rolls, and try the different types of fruits there because they have some really unique fruits. Also, don't forget to try the Vietnamese coffee. So there's hot Vietnamese coffee, iced Vietnamese coffee and egg coffee, which you get in Hanoi. If you're eating street food, be sure to find out how much it's for before you actually eat it, because this one time what happened with us was that we had coconut water and we didn't ask him how much it was for, but when the time to pay came, he really overcharged us and we couldn't really do anything about it. We did bargain and bring down the price, but we still ended up paying a lot for coconut water. So be careful with situations like that. Next, I'm going to give you some general tips for when you're in Vietnam. Tip number 1 is about taxis. So I've heard there are a lot of taxi scams that happen in Vietnam, but luckily we didn't really experience any such thing. So there are 2 major taxi companies in Vietnam that are both cheap and reliable, and they're called Vinasun and Mylan. There are also Ubers in Vietnam, so you could book an Uber as well. But as a general tip, just be careful and actually see your driver put your luggage inside the trunk of the car and then sit inside the car. Tip number 2 is about money. So the best currency exchange rate we found was at the airport, which is surprising because that's not the case with most other countries. But if you want to convert your money, get it done at the airport. Also, there are ATM machines everywhere, so you could just use your debit card and withdraw money as well. But keep in mind that they do charge a fee when you withdraw money, so you might want to withdraw a lot of money at once if you're doing that. Tip number 3 is safety. So before going to Vietnam, I was told that it's not a safe country, but I don't think that's true at all. It felt like a super safe country to me, and not once did I feel unsafe there. Even the times I was alone, I felt really safe. But having said that, I think it's important to be careful and not to go to secluded areas alone. So just be careful, especially if you're a solo traveler. It's not an unsafe country. People there are really nice, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. Tip number 4 is language. So although a lot of people in Vietnam do speak English, many people don't. So in such cases, you can just use Google Translate to communicate with them. Most people there can read Vietnamese, so it shouldn't really be that much of a problem. Tip number 5 is about shopping. So Vietnam is actually great for shopping. A lot of brands get their stuff made in Vietnam. So there are these made in Vietnam stores that you'll easily find as you walk around the city. So you can easily find North Face jackets and Under Armour clothes for a lot cheaper than the actual price. But be sure to bargain because they do overcharge you. Tip number 6 is about SIM cards. So you get SIM cards at the airport and outside the airport as well. But we got our SIM cards at the airport. I think that's a good idea because communication might be a slight problem outside. So we paid about $10 each for our SIM card, and we got 1 month of free data and local calls. So I think that was a good deal. There's also really good Wi-Fi everywhere you go in Vietnam, which actually kind of surprised me. So I think I'm done. Those are all my tips. I hope you found them useful. I also posted a picture on my social media asking people to ask me questions about my trip to Vietnam, and a lot of people sent in questions, so I'm just going to go through those now and answer questions that I haven't already covered in my video. Frugal Fun asks, how many days are good enough to get a feel of the city, and what is the best time to visit? So I think the best time to visit Vietnam is between Feb and April and between August and October. Basically when the weather is not too extreme. January was really nice except for Hanoi, which was kind of cold. But the other places the weather was pretty decent. So I think Jan is a good time as well. Also I think you need to spend at least 3 days in each city to get a feel of the city. We spent about 5 days in each city, but I think you can easily spend 3 and still explore everything. And if you're planning a trip to Vietnam, I think you need a minimum of 2 weeks. Nehal asks, is a tour required for the trip, or can you travel yourself and book as you go? So we didn't really book too many things before we went. We did book our hotels and a couple of tours, but you can just go there and book things as well. You don't even need to book a hotel before going because the visa doesn't require that, so you can just go there and book everything. We did book a few tours in advance because we didn't want them to get sold out and we were sure we wanted to do them. But other than that, I think you can just go there and book everything. Nagpal Sahaj asks, what's the overall cost and what are the places or things that are a must do if I plan to go there for a week, and the local market to get local ingredients and produce, as I'm a food blogger. So I don't really know about the local markets. You're gonna have to Google that. But if you're going for a week, I don't think you'll be able to cover all the places that we went to. But it really comes down to your personal preference. So the vlogs that I've posted are pretty in-depth and cover all the touristy spots in each city. So I think you can just watch my vlogs, figure out what interests you, and just do those things. How do you manage to find veg food, and how do you find out the most special things about the place that you go to? So just like everyone else, I find all my answers on Google. So I just Google where to find veg food, where to find Indian food, what all there is to see in the city. I also watch a lot of YouTube videos to get an idea of what all there is to see in the city. So basically what we did was the first day in each city, we didn't really plan anything. We just wanted to walk around, get a feel of the city, and also watch a few YouTube videos to figure out what all there is to see. So that's how we planned our trip. Aditya asks, how did you find Indian food? So most of the time while we were there, we ate Vietnamese food because we wanted to eat as much local food as we could. But we did miss Indian food sometimes. So we would just Google and figure out where Indian restaurants were and just walk to them and eat Indian food. In Ho Chi Minh City, there was this Indian restaurant Natraj right opposite our hotel, so we just walked to it and eat Indian food. And in Hanoi, we Googled and found this hotel called Namaste Hanoi, which was really nice. So those are 2 Indian restaurants that I can recommend. Okay, looks like most of the other questions are about the budget, which I've already covered. So that's it from me for this video. I hope you found this useful. If you're planning a trip to Vietnam, I hope these tips help you. And if you're planning a trip abroad, I hope you learned a thing or two as well. If you found this video useful, be sure to give it a like and leave a comment and let me know if you have any more questions, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. I'm going to leave all the links in the description box below, so be sure to check that out, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I make travel and lifestyle videos every week. Also be sure to press the bell button next to it to be notified when I upload a new video, and I'm really active on social media, so you might want to follow me there, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!